My goal and my desire for you is to have a better and a clearer understanding of who Jesus is. That is this series that we're in, Who is Jesus? And we're actually going to get right into it. Not much introduction, but I do want to say that I need for us to understand the importance of what we're talking about tonight. The importance of what we're talking about, where you'll get a little bit of a feel for it as we go. We're going to start off in Luke chapter 5, verses 1 through 3. And it reads, "As the crowd was pressing in on Jesus to hear God's word, he, Jesus, was standing by Lake Gennesaret. He saw two boats at the edge of the lake. The fishermen had left them and were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, which belonged to Simon, and asked him to put out a little from the land." So if you've been here for a couple of weeks, you know that one thing that I've mentioned is that I want you to study the Bible in a way that looks for what is interesting and what is important. Looks for what is interesting and what is important. And because of that, I want to teach this message a little differently, where what we're going to do is we're going to walk through these passages. So we read verses 1 through 3 based on the suggestion actually from one of my students in my groups. He actually was like, "Oh, is the passage on our study guides?" And I was like, "No, I don't know why I haven't thought of that, though." So you've actually got this passage on your study guide. You can circle whatever is interesting to you, circle whatever is square, maybe whatever is important, or underline it. But I want you to follow along as we read this. So in these first three verses, what I want us to see first and foremost is that Jesus is speaking to a crowd again. So we've been talking about that over the past few weeks, that Jesus, he's not afraid of a crowd. He's speaking to crowds. Crowds gather to hear him speak and teach. They gather to learn from him. They gather to hear about Jesus. We've already established that this happens and that actually you all gathered here tonight, you are a crowd. You might not look at yourselves that way, but if we try to put ourselves in the shoes of the people that are in these stories, we'll recognize, like, man, we actually have some similarities to them. So you are a crowd that is gathered here today to learn about Jesus, just like the crowds gathered back then to hear from Jesus' own mouth. And so they were gathering together, but one thing that we've talked about crowds is that they walk away, they disperse. And when they disperse, there are most people within the crowd will walk away from Jesus. They'll walk away from Jesus the exact same way that they came to Jesus, meaning they don't change at all. They hear something from Jesus' mouth, and they're like, "Wow, that was kind of cool. Man, he's kind of interesting." But they don't view Jesus as important. But there tends to be a few people within these crowds that will walk away with Jesus, and they'll experience some type of life change where they're saying, "I'm committing my life to following this man. I'm committing my life. He's changed me. I see things a little bit clearly, and I understand that this is not just a normal man, but as we've talked about for the past couple of weeks, that Jesus is both God, 100% God, as well as 100% man, and that's hard to understand, and we'll never fully comprehend it, but it's an interesting and important fact about Jesus that we have to believe in. And so some people walk away with Jesus. And I want you to listen to the rest of this message with that lens, or considering, which person am I? In this crowd that's gathered here tonight, which person am I? Am I the person that will walk away tonight, walk away from Jesus like, "Oh, that was cool, but I came for the snacks," or "I came for my friends"? Or will you be the person that walks away with Jesus with a commitment that says, "Jesus, I want to follow you"? You've got to answer that question for yourself. And you can't just say, "Yeah, I answered it tonight," because tomorrow you've got to have a heart that says, "I'm going to follow you again today, Jesus." And then the next day, you got to do it all over again, because we get distracted. We talked about that. We get distracted by other created things. And we'll get back to that a little bit later. But the other thing I want us to notice in these first three verses is that not only is Jesus speaking to a crowd, but in particular, he's at this lake. And I need us to notice that the fishermen were washing their nets. Do we have any fishermen or fisherwomen in the crowd? Anybody that likes fishing? Raise your hand. Jonathan, Lauren, Hayden. Okay, 3 people. Well, you're like me. I actually started thinking about this, and I realized that there are a few different levels of fishermen, okay? There's people like me who are occasional fishermen. I only fish on invitation. I'm never going to be the guy that's like, "Man, I really want to go fishing today. It's a beautiful day outside. I want to go sit in the sun and dry up like a raisin and hope that I catch fish." That's not going to be me. because I'd rather be indoors. That's just how I am. But then next to that, we have people like or the people who might have raised their hands here who are hobbyists. They view fishing as a hobby, like, oh yeah, it's relaxing, it's therapeutic. I like being in the sun. I like hoping for a catch. Then you got other people that, like my little brother who just graduated from Greenbrier, he was actually on the fishing team. Didn't know that they had fishing teams in high school, but he was part of that. And he would go on competitions. But then even a step above that are the professional fishermen, those who do it for a living. They fish because that is their means of life. Their livelihood depends on catching fish, selling those fish, eating those fish. And that's who Simon was. We see that name being introduced here, where Simon is described as one of the owners of the boats. He fishes for a living, and Jesus, he recognizes that crowds are coming to him to hear him teach. And Jesus says, man, this is too many people who are here on the lake shore. So he says, Simon, let me get in your boat. I need to borrow your boat. And Simon's probably like, look, I just finished up work and I was about to go home, but sure, I'll help you. So we got that setting now, right? We see kind of where the story is going. So let's pick up in verse 4 and 5. It says, when that is Jesus, when Jesus had finished speaking, he finishes teaching his message, Jesus said to Simon, put out into deep water and let down your nets for a catch. Master, Simon replied, we've worked hard all night long and caught nothing. But if you say so, I'll let down the nets. Now, Jesus has finished his message. In previous messages, we've talked about how crowds will listen to Jesus and go, wow, what a great message. And then walk away with no life change. But in this scenario, the focus is not on the crowds anymore. Jesus actually shifts his focus from the crowd. He narrows in on one person named Simon, the owner of the boat. He gives Simon this instruction, this directive. And he says, hey, let's put out in deeper water, cast your net, and let's catch some fish. Let's go fishing. And Simon has this response. He goes, wait, hey, listen, I've been fishing all night long and I didn't catch nothing. But if you're telling me to do it, I guess I'll do it. If you say so, Jesus, I will do it. Now, let me ask y'all, because I'm guessing that only 3 people raised their hand saying they like fishing, because anyone else in here who has fished and not caught something. So how do you feel when you go fishing and you don't catch anything? Awful. You feel like you've wasted time. You're starting to think like, why did I even come out here? And now you're noticing like your senses, because you're angry, your senses are really fired up. So you're like, man, I smell all the dead fish in this water. I should have just stayed home and played my video game. I wouldn't be out here. That's at least what's going through my mind. Like, this was a waste of time. And so if we're putting ourselves in the story, recognizing that this is an interesting situation, we can also keep in mind like, man, Simon probably felt that way. Simon was probably frustrated and agitated, like, man, this was a waste of time. I'm tired. But let's not forget that, one, this is a couple thousand years ago. So Simon didn't go out there just fishing for hobby, but he was a professional fisherman. So he fished for his livelihood, which means, okay, he's not just frustrated because he didn't catch anything, but he's probably exhausted because it said he was out there all night long. But then also, if this is his livelihood, he's probably worried. Because Simon is going, man, if I don't catch fish, I don't have any fish to sell. And if I don't sell any fish, I don't make any money. And if I don't make any money, I can't buy any bread or any food for my family. He's probably also thinking, man, even if I had caught 2 fish, I would have something to bring back home to my family. Because remember, a couple thousand years ago, they don't have refrigerators. They don't say, man, I've got a couple, maybe 10 bass still in my freezer. I'll just pop those on the grill. No, he's depending daily for his livelihood. So he's going home saying, how am I going to feed my family? So he's worried. He's anxious. He's frustrated. He's exhausted. He's feeling everything that we feel when we don't catch fish, except his livelihood is tied to it, so it's further intensified. Now the story's getting a little more interesting because we've set the scene, but now we're putting ourselves in the shoes and saying, man, Simon, I can imagine how you feel. I would feel that way too. So let's take it up another step. How do y'all feel when someone tells you to do something that they have done for less time than you have? For example, I know we've got a couple of lacrosse players in here, right? Avery, yeah, there you go. Maddie, All right, Maddie, I want to ask you. Avery, how long have you been playing lacrosse? Oh, she's counting. 6 years. All right, so all of y'all put yourselves in Avery's shoes. You've been playing lacrosse for 6 years. Me, on the other hand, I've never played lacrosse a day in my life. I honestly don't know if I've ever touched a lacrosse stick. What is the stick called? Is it a lacrosse stick? Okay. I wasn't sure if it had an official name or if that was the lacrosse. You know how some sports do that? It's weird, whatever. But imagine if I'm going to you guys, you people who have been playing lacrosse for 6 years, and I'm picking up the stick for my first time, and I start trying to give you suggestions and critiques. I'm like, hey, you should pick up the stick and, flick your wrist a little bit more when you're passing. And when you're aiming for the shot or you're trying to get a catch, make sure you keep your eye on the ball and make sure you rotate from your hips. What if I'm giving all of these suggestions and instructions? You would be looking at me like, hush! Shut your mouth. You don't know what you're talking about. You think you do, but I've been doing this for longer than you. So now combine that frustration with the frustration of having not caught any fish, knowing that it's your livelihood. So now you're worried and you're anxious about how you'll provide for your family. Plus you're irritated because now I'm suggesting to you how to do what you do best. That's kind of what's happening here in this situation. Again, Simon is a professional fisherman. But if we look at that verse again, verses 4 and 5, it says, when Jesus had finished speaking, he said to Simon, put out in the deep water and let your nets down for a catch. And Simon replies, we've worked hard all night and caught nothing. But if you say so, I'll let down the nets. Do y'all know or remember what Jesus' profession is? What was his skill or his trade? Carpenter. He builds things. So a carpenter is telling a fisherman how to fish. So again, Simon is frustrated, he's exhausted, he's anxious and worried, but he's also have the right mind to say, Jesus, look, I think I know my job. I've been doing it for 6 years. I know what I'm doing. I know how to fish. And because I'm an invitational fisher, I had to look this up and do some research. Do y'all know the best time to go fishing? At night. I mean, y'all know this. Y'all don't fish, but y'all know this. I didn't know this. The best time to fish is at night because it's cooler at night. It's not as hot. Fish don't like the heat. But then there's also less boats that are on the water. So the fish are more likely to feel safe and they're just hunting for food. But then also because it's darker, they can't see. So their ability to be like, hey, that looks a little suspicious. Not going for that worm. Or let me avoid that net. Their ability to, their sonar stuff is not working as well. And so it's easier to catch fish at night. That makes the story more interesting because Simon is not only a professional, but he was fishing at the best opportune time for him to catch a fish. But he didn't catch anything. He didn't catch anything in the moment where he should have caught at least something. He ended up with 0 fish. And then he has this man named Jesus coming to him saying, I'm going to give you a suggestion. Put out in the deep water, cast your net to the side, and let's go fishing. I found this commentary. It said it this way. It said, nighttime was the best time for fishing. And Simon may be suggesting in his confession of doubt that as an expert, fishing at the right time and having caught nothing, it was useless and hopeless to try to go fishing at the request of a carpenter. If that is the way it is, then Simon's willingness to act on Jesus' suggestion shows a realization that Jesus' word was not to be ignored on any subject. Simon might not agree with Jesus, but he could obey Jesus. That's a powerful statement. That Simon, the professional fisherman who was doing things the best way he knew how, doing things the right way. I'm going fishing at night. I've got my nets ready. In fact, that at the beginning when they were washing their nets, that's part of what fishermen do, where they would wash their nets and check them to make sure they're ready for the next time they go out and hit the water. Simon is doing everything right. So he had right reason to disagree with Jesus, but he still obeyed Jesus. He still trusted Jesus. He even called Jesus master in his response, which demonstrates some type of faith that says, what you're saying don't make sense, and I don't agree with it, but I'll do it. We can disagree with Jesus and still obey Jesus because we recognize who he is. Let's look at verses 6 through 7. It says, when they did this, now Simon and his people, his other boats, they are responding in faith. They say, when Simon and the partners did this, they caught a great number of fish and their nets began to tear. So they signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and filled both boats so full that they began to sink. My Memphis crew who went to Memphis last year, we actually heard a message taught on this passage where the pastor actually asked, he was like, how did they get the boats back to shore? And we don't know, but they managed to do it. But imagine that. They caught so many fish that both boats began to sink. That is amazing. That's too many to count. But this is the response to their obedience. Simon was obedient, and he was blessed and rewarded for his obedience. Jesus demonstrated right there through this scenario that he is sovereign over nature. Remember that word sovereign means having supreme authority or supreme power over something. What we're saying is that Jesus, because he's 100% God and 100% man, he has complete power over nature. We talked last week about how in the book of John and in the book of Genesis, it talks about the creation story and how Jesus was actually present when the world was created. It says that everything was created through Jesus. So that means that all of nature, including the fish, were created by Jesus. And because Jesus created them and is sovereign over them, he has authority to tell nature what to do, and nature doesn't. Nature cannot disobey Jesus. And now we don't have a detailed understanding of what happened. We don't know if Jesus did, in our modern day thinking, we might imagine that Jesus did a Thanos snap and then the fish said, gotcha, I'll go in the net. Or maybe Jesus was more like an Aquaman scenario and he did his little sonar communication and the fish said, aye, aye, Captain, I'll go into the net. We don't know. But most likely, he didn't have to do anything. He just willed it to happen because he is that powerful. That should be interesting to you. That even the fish will obey Jesus' command. That Simon was obedient to Jesus even though he was tired, even though he was exhausted, even though he was stressed and worried and anxious and nervous and frustrated. He obeyed Jesus. He had an experience where he didn't catch anything after doing everything he knew to do. But when he obeyed Jesus, now fish go into his net. So much fish, more fish than he's ever caught before. Jesus did that. And we get to see the response that follows. But even though it didn't make sense and went against Simon's knowledge of fishing and his experience, he obeyed Jesus because he trusted Jesus. And we actually don't have time to look back. This is Luke chapter 5, but you have as a reference point Luke chapter 4, verses 38 through 44 on your study guide. And I encourage you guys to read that over this week in your study guide as you prepare for Connect groups next week. But you'll see a passage there where I believe it's actually Simon's first impression or his first encounter with Jesus was that Jesus healed Simon's mother-in-law just in the chapter before. So this scenario that we're reading now is probably Simon's second encounter with Jesus, where we understand now that he has some reason to trust. Like, hey, we don't even know if Simon was there to witness the healing, but he probably heard about it in a way that he's like, look, there's something about this man named Jesus that he's powerful, he's mighty, he's trustworthy because he did the healing of my mother-in-law. So if he's telling me to go out in water, I'll do it. I got nothing to lose. And he's able to trust Jesus because he remembers what Jesus did before. Where for us, we've got to understand that the way that Jesus reveals himself to you as interesting yesterday, it gives you more reason to trust him today, but it's only if you remember correctly. What that means is that Jesus has done things in your life that maybe you're not even aware of, or maybe you are aware of, but you forget. He's performed blessings and miracles in your life that if you forget it, you'll have no reason to trust him tomorrow when you face another situation where you're in need, where you're hungry for another miracle, when you are thirsty, needing God to show up. If you remember correctly, you'll be able to say, God, I know what you did last time, so I'm going to trust you in this situation. So let's finish out verses 8 through 11. It says, when Simon Peter saw this, when he saw the great catch that Jesus brought in, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, "Go away from me, because I am a sinful man, Lord." For he and all those with him were amazed at the catch of fish they had taken. And so were James and John, Zebedee's sons, who were Simon's fishing partners. "Don't be afraid," Jesus told Simon. "From now on, you will be catching people." And then they brought the boats to land, left everything, and followed Jesus. You see, Simon's experience gave him a clearer understanding of who he was dealing with. Maybe he remembered the healing of his mother-in-law, but when he got to see and experience firsthand that Jesus was able to do miracles, that Jesus was sovereign over nature, he further recognized how worthy Jesus is of his worship and his praise. He even cried out saying, "Get away from, I'm not worthy to be in your presence, Jesus. You are so sovereign and supreme and powerful. I'm not worthy to be around you." But the invitation that Jesus gave him says, "I know you're not worthy, but I want you. I'm desiring you. I'm pursuing you." Simon was able to see the interestingness and the importance of Jesus. And even though the miracle was amazing itself, he recognized something that was even more amazing, was the character and the identity of Jesus. Simon could have only viewed the miracle as interesting. He could have walked away from Jesus going, "Man, that was awesome. Wow. Now you've actually taught me how to fish. So tomorrow night when I get out here, I know to put out into the deep, cast my net off to the side, and then I'm going to catch a bunch of fish again." But what we actually see in this response is that he left. It says they loaded, they brought the boats to land, left everything, and followed Jesus. They left the boats, they left the fish, they left their jobs. The same man who was probably worried and anxious about how to feed his family, how to provide and live, was now saying, this miracle has nothing compared to the miracle worker. Because if he's done that once, imagine what else he can do. He's worthy of my worship. He's worthy of my praise. The point is for us is that we can focus so much on how interesting Jesus is that we lose sight of how important Jesus is. Simon could have focused on the fishing lesson and say, "Man, I know what to do next time, and I'm going to keep doing it. Bye, Jesus. You go teach somewhere else, but thanks for showing me what to do, because now I love this miracle." But instead, he focused on Jesus and said, "I want more of you, even if I don't have my livelihood. I want more of you, Jesus, even if I don't catch another fish for the rest of my life." Let me put in perspective in personal terms how that is actually a lesson that Lauren and I are learning in our lives, where if you don't know, Lauren is my wife, and you might be wondering, like, why do youth pastors talk so much about their wives? It's because we love them. I've seen the TikToks. It's a joke going around, but I love my wife, so I like to talk about her. So my wife, Lauren, is a registered nurse. And if you don't know, we're in a pandemic, so she hates her job. She hated her job even before the pandemic. So now she's even more stressed and even more overworked. She just put her face down like, "Oh my gosh, you're embarrassing me." She would actually tell you this. And I asked for her permission for this story. So, but the point is, she does not like her job. She's overworked. Most nurses work a 12-hour shift. And so Lauren is supposed to work from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., but she actually sometimes works 13-hour shifts, 14-hour shifts. Even last night, yesterday on Tuesday, she went to work at 7 and she got back home at 9 o'clock. And just her previous shift on Saturday, she went to work at 7 and Lauren got back home at 10:30 p.m. So she's working mega hours. That's a 15-and-a-half-hour day that she just worked. So she's exhausted. And so she recognized, like, man, this is really tough, and nursing is difficult anywhere right now because of the pandemic, but she desired something different. So she started putting out applications last week, and she actually got 2 interviews last week. The first interview was with labor and delivery. She wants to deliver babies. And so this was actually her first choice. She interviewed for the job on Wednesday, and she hadn't heard anything back. But on that same day, or the day before, she also interviewed for a position with a unit called endoscopy, and we won't get into what that unit does because it'll probably gross you out. But she interviewed for a second unit the same week, and she actually heard back from that other unit last week. They contacted her and was like, hey, you got the job, here's some paperwork to fill out. And Lauren told them that she said, hey, thank you, I'm grateful, but if I'm honest, this is not my first choice. So can I have a little bit of time to think on it? And they were like, sure, but you need to let us know. Again, this was last week. So they told her, we need you to let us know by Tuesday, September 7th, which was yesterday. And so ironically enough, the labor and delivery manager was on vacation. Guess what? Until Tuesday, September 7th. So she's got odds stacked against her. One job that she's guaranteed says, you got to let us know if you want it by Tuesday or we're going to give the job to somebody else. And then the person who has the ability to hire her and offer her the other position that she wants is on vacation until her deadline. But then also I told you she worked yesterday, her super busy, super stressful job. So we found ourselves needing a miracle, and we were praying, hoping, and waiting, and trusting God, saying, God, please give us the job that is best for Lauren and best for our family. And Lord, please, if you are willing, make it the job that she wants the most. That was our prayer. And so lo and behold, there was just the nick of time moment where everything worked out just as it needed to. Yesterday at 11:51 a.m., Lauren got the email from the labor and delivery manager saying, hey, back from vacation, we want to offer you the position. Gave her the paperwork, and lo and behold, she also had enough time in her busy job to say, hey, let me get my email. I'm going to respond. I'm going to accept the position, et cetera, et cetera. And she was able to respond to the other job and say, hey, I'm sorry, I'm grateful, but I'll decline this offer. I got to offer somewhere else. Everything worked out the way it needed to, which is great. And it shows us that God is a God who is always on time. You might hear that around church. Like, man, God might not show up when you want him to, but he's always on time. That's what we say. We experience that. And that is interesting, that the God who created everything in the world, that God that created time itself, is not bound by time. So even when we feel like he's late or he's moving slow, he's moving right at the pace that he needs to move. That's great, and it's interesting. But if we focus on how interesting that is, we can lose sight of the reality that this God who performed this miracle for us first heard our prayers. He first cared for Lauren and I in a way that said, I hear you crying out to me. I see the tears that you are shedding because you're so stressed out from work. I see how exhausted you are. I see how frustrated you are. I see how anxious and nervous you are. I see how much you hate your job. And I need you to know that I care for you. I know that you walk into work on a daily basis wanting to quit your job, but I'm going to help you get through it. This God showed compassion to Lauren and I in a way that is very special that we could miss because we're so excited about the miracle itself that we get distracted from the blessing of having an intimate relationship with God that we can cry out to, just as we just sang in that song. You are the refuge I run to. You are the fire that leads me through the night. We got to experience God in an intimate way that many people don't. That is a blessing in and of itself. Just like for Simon, he could have gotten distracted by the blessing and said, I've got a boatload of fish and I am going to sell and make a whole lot of money. But instead he said, I'll leave it all because this man right here is worthy of my loyalty. He's worthy of my allegiance. He's worthy of my worship. And I will spend the rest of my days following this man. The miracle is just a sample of the goodness of the miracle worker. He got to see Jesus in a special way, and you and I get to do the same. We've got to recognize that God's blessings and miracles are not only interesting events in our lives, but they are also important demonstrations of who God is. That is huge for us. I started this message saying, I want you to understand or get to see a clearer picture of who Jesus is. Jesus is beautiful and awesome and amazing himself. We don't have to paint a pretty picture or add some things or embellish some things or take away some things. Jesus is who he is, and he always is who he is. He doesn't change. And so this same God is at work in your lives today. It's just up to us to recognize it. And so right now, before we get into our final song of worship, I believe that we need to recognize that Simon's response was very particular. Yes, he cried out to Jesus. He said, "Get away from me. I don't deserve to be around you." And instead of Jesus pushing him away, going, "Yep, you're right," Jesus says, "No, I want you to follow me." He gave him an invitation. And because of Simon's obedience, Simon's friends, his fishing partners, also got to take part of that blessing. They also received the invitation to follow Jesus. They didn't hang around and go, "Bye, Simon, you can leave this fish if you want to, but we're about to get rich." They said, "No, Simon, I see what you see. I experience through you this blessing and this miracle." And so for those of you who are here tonight saying, "Yes, I'm a member of this crowd, but I walk away with Jesus. I live a life that is committed to him. And sometimes I fall short of that. Sometimes I get distracted. But tonight, I want to walk away. If I die tonight, I want to walk away from In Focus Youth at 8:30 saying, "Jesus, I'm committed to you. Jesus, I'm trusting you. Jesus, I want to be Simon for my friends or my fishing partners. I want to live a life that is obedient and trusting you to where people around me, my teammates, my classmates, my coworkers, my friends, my family members, my neighbors, they get to see what you're doing in my life, and they're blessed by it because they get to see a clearer picture of who you are. I want them to follow you the way that I follow you because you're worthy of it." Then I want to pray for you. And you can pray with me just saying, "God, help me. I can't follow you by myself because like Simon, I'm not worthy to follow you. But Jesus, you make me worthy. Jesus, will you provide miracles and blessings that testify, that will enable me to testify to how good and how sovereign you are." If you're willing to pray prayers like that in obedient surrender where your heart is bowing before Jesus like Simon did, he will show up. He will show up. But if you're in here tonight saying, "You know what? I'm part of that crowd that walks away from Jesus, and I hear messages about Jesus, I hear people talking about Jesus, but it doesn't change me. But for some reason tonight hits a little different," you're like, "Man, maybe I do want to learn more about this Jesus." The invitation is there. The invitation is there where you can cry out to Jesus with humble faith that says, "God, I am a sinner, but I need you to save me. I need you to open my eyes so that I see you more clearly, that I know that you're interesting and important, more so than anything else in this world." And if you believe that in humble faith, you are saved and invited into right relationship with Jesus in a way where you will experience closeness with him greater than anything in this life, that you'll find scenarios where you say, "I don't want the richness of having a lot of fish like Simon. I don't, even if it costs me the popularity amongst my friend group, even if it costs me this relationship that I've been attached to for so long, I'm willing to let it go for Jesus." Because the miracle has nothing on the miracle worker. It's just a sample. We get to worship that Jesus tonight. So as the band comes back up, I'll pray for us once more. And if you'll stand on your feet and join me.